Let the children flourish. I count it a great privilege to be able to speak on this delightful subject. And this subject I found something on my heart the first time I gave an all nations presentation in January. And as I was showing the pictures of the families that were on the field, I saw those little children. And it touched my heart. And I spoke to the exec team about that, having no idea that today I would be standing here. And let me just say several things. This subject is much larger than one topic, and certainly much larger than myself as a speaker. Did you know that there are over 50 children on the mission field whose parents are serving under All Nations? And as All Nations adds additional teams, that number is sure to grow, as well as families grow in number in the field. And I greatly respect and appreciate the families that are giving themselves to this strenuous work. And what a great blessing to think of future workers on the field already being prepared for their own contribution to the kingdom of God. That, of course, is our goal. To flourish is to bring into full bloom. To bring to full bloom means beauty, glory, and praise to the King of the kingdom. To flourish is more than mere survival. Now, sometimes we hear expressions like this. How can we balance our ministry calling with our family needs? I believe the question is an important one, but I don't like the way it's framed. And let me explain. To me, it sounds like it's an either-or matter. And I'm saying here today that it's not either-or, but it is a both-and matter. William Carey is known as the father of modern missions. And he has been an inspiration to many people. However, there's a side to William's experience that I don't believe any of us would want to duplicate. I don't remember where I got this. In 1793, Dorothy Carey, pregnant with her fourth child, refused to accompany her husband William to India. He took their eldest son and boarded the ship without her. At the last minute, with 1 day to spare, friends convinced Dorothy to go. She hastily packed and boarded the boat. She subsequently lost one of her children, had already lost two, and eventually her mind. The decision to live in a foreign setting has a huge impact on the lives of children, and especially, we're not talking about a short-term mission trip. And today I am looking at the subject of parental care for children who though away from their birth culture are nourished to become children who flourish in life. Now, please understand, there's a lot of differing circumstances and questions that I am not prepared to answer. And I'm not only speaking about parental care. I'm speaking also about community care, which means the sending church and the All Nations ministry. In preparation for this topic, I received a response to a questionnaire that I sent out to a TCK, and I'll explain that later. And I have permission to share her response. I told her that I will keep her name from being linked to this, and so I changed a little bit in her response to so that there aren't clues and so forth. So the purpose of this topic is to raise awareness on this vital subject. We cannot afford to lose one child in the process of church planting in dark places. Amen? We can't, there's not one of those 50 that we can afford to lose. And so as sending churches, all of us, this subject takes high priority. And the question is, how are the children doing? And that's a question not only for parents, but it's a question for our Heavenly Father. How can we help the children to flourish? Children are a gift from God. That's what the Bible says. Behold, children are a gift from the Lord, the fruit of the womb a reward. And you see the various versions there. Kinder sind ein Geschenk vom Herr, und die Frucht von Mutterleib ist Gabe bei ihm. That's a Pennsylvania Dutch Bible, and it's saying the same thing the others are saying. Children are a gift from God. And I'm saying here this afternoon that children smell like heaven. Okay, I know they don't always smell like heaven. I realize that. And I also realize that we see evidences of the serpent bite. But Jesus said that unless we are converted and become as little children, we will not enter into the kingdom of heaven. So we don't enter the kingdom of heaven as powerful rulers or wise counselors or educated professors or capable adults, but as little children. As I said, there's also evidence of the serpent bite. And as parents, we must train them to realize that the whole world does not revolve around them. But now, I said they smell like heaven. And now for a bit, we're going to breathe in some of that fragrance. They are so precious. A living soul. Living souls for whom Jesus died and rose again, even though they are so helpless and they don't know when they're born. But Jesus Christ has a plan for the little one. Jesus loved little children. He was much displeased when his disciples turned away the people who wanted Jesus to touch their children. They are so innocent and unsuspecting. Their innocence shines through, and it's a great contrast to a guilty, deceptive, manipulative, dishonest world. They're so trusting. I have one blood brother who's about 11, 12 years younger than I, and one day, we lived on a farm, and my dad had a tiling project going. There were some men that were coming in and laying tile for drainage at the field. And so these men were out there. But my little brother was out there too, but he was hiding around the wagon and keeping his distance, especially from one man who was an African American, a black man. Now, the reason for this, sometime earlier, he had accompanied my father to a farm sale, and he had some friends there, and my brother tended to be mischievous, and they got into some things, and there was another older man there that saw this, and he tried to take it in the hand. He said, "Listen, boys, if you don't start behaving, you see that black man there? He's going to put you in a gunny sack." And my brother believed it. And so he was afraid of this black man. Unfortunate, but they are so trusting. Innocent, yet impacted by sin. These little ones here, they don't know it. but they have taken their first breath with a load of baggage that only Jesus can release them from. They escaped the abortionist's tools. And it is unlikely they will ever meet their earthly father, for he was part of an enemy force that came and raped their young mother. So much to learn. Oh, there are so many questions. Many, many questions. They need their parents to guide, instruct, and teach them. Though their understanding is limited, their ability to learn is very great. They are moldable, and they can be taught manners and respect. This little fellow, not only I felt he was the cutest little fellow in his area, but he would come after a service and he would very politely and soberly shake hands with the speakers. There is so much potential. There are so many possibilities that lay before them. And what a blessing and excitement it is to see them develop into the useful people using the gifts that God gave them. There is such a need for security, for the protection from evil and harm. Children can add value to the team. They can open up ministry opportunities for the parents. And as parents train, teach, and relate to their children, they provide a living model for the onlookers. After all, the world doesn't know how to take care of children very well. Respectful and obedient children give our message an authority that is powerful indeed. Now, it is true that Paul, as he writes in 1 Corinthians chapter 7, indicates that there is a time that a single person can better serve the Lord. I have yet to find anywhere in the Scripture that married people ought to avoid children so they can better serve the Lord. At the same time, we recognize that children can present serious challenges to the team. They may feel confused, insecure, neglected, harassed, and misunderstood. And their struggles may feel time-consuming, stressful, and irritating to parents who are involved in the important work of mission. And they may struggle spiritually, socially, and emotionally. And so one of the purposes of this subject is to remind us of their needs, challenges, and contributions. God will call our children. I know we have a part to do. We teach them Bible stories. We teach them morals, what is right and wrong. And we train them. When they learn from us, they learn many things from us. But there is going to be, listen to this, there is going to be a time when God, we've spoken to them about the Lord, but when God himself will speak to that child's heart. Hallelujah. The Lord called Samuel, and it was at a dark time. Samuel wasn't even living at home, but he was of the household of Eli away from home. And it was only once a year that Samuel saw his parents. His mother had prayed for a son that was to be dedicated to the Lord. But as I said, it was a dark time. Eli's sons were evil influences. And now it is dark outside. Okay, it's not daylight, but it's dark outside, but it was dark inside as well. And God called Samuel. And Samuel answered that call. He didn't know the Lord. He didn't recognize his voice, thinking it was Eli. Here's what the scripture says. He got up and ran. He didn't just get up and go, but he ran to Eli, thinking that Eli needed his help. But strangely enough, it wasn't Eli. So he went back to bed and again heard his voice, his name. And this time it doesn't say he ran, but he got up and went. And again, back to bed. And then again he heard. And then Eli perceived that the Lord was calling him, and he told him what to say. He said, Samuel, when you hear your name again, you say, speak, Lord, for your servant is listening. Now imagine what that must have been like for Samuel as he lay there. Is he going to hear his name again? But he heard his name and he said, speak, for your servant listens. So God was making personal contact, and he gave him a message. It was not a pleasant message. It was a message that Samuel was afraid to share the next morning because it had to do with Eli and his house. And, okay, as Samuel went about his duties, Eli says, Samuel, you come here. Okay. What did the Lord tell you? And don't you spare one word. And so Samuel told him all that the Lord had told him. We'll notice a number of commendable qualities, character qualities of Samuel. This was indeed an important moment in the call of Samuel when God called him. But prior to this time, he had been trained and prepared for this very moment. And we see respect and obedience to authority, promptness and willingness to serve, persistence and continuance even in a confusing time, integrity and honesty, openness even when it was not easy. So as parents, we teach and we train and we guide and instruct and correct. And the purpose of this is so that when they hear the call, they will say, speak, Lord. And I'm repeating again to those of you who have young children, the day will come when the Lord will make personal contact. Training the child is an important ministry. There are many responsibilities that parents have, but I think of no ministry that is more important than that of training the gifts that God has given us. And the ministries that we are involved in provide many opportunities for child training. Daily living is ripe with opportunity. Daily prayer by name for the child, carrying them on our hearts. This seems so obvious, but there are times when the pressure of our responsibilities and all the good things and important things and the issues in this meeting and that meeting and so forth, these things have a way at times of slipping from our minds. Blessed is that child that is trained to understand that the world does not revolve around them. I've mentioned that before. Learning to be honest and obedient is vitally important. And for we as parents to connect with our child in relationship, do not think that the key to connection is vacations or some special activities, good as they may be and certainly have their place. But there is something deeper than that. And that deeper thing takes a lot of time. Our children need to feel heard. They need the security of loving discipline. They need to sense we place a high priority on them. And they need to feel safe with us. asking questions, giving them a private space, and seeking out friends for them are responsibilities that we can take to help make connections. It takes a ready listening ear and perceptive eye. Why has my son been quiet? Why has his response? Why is my daughter always complaining? What is going on? James 1:5, I'm leaving this with you. If any of you lacks wisdom, let him ask of God, who gives to all liberally and without reproach, and it will be given to him. It takes a lot of asking God. A lot of asking God. Now, gaining the heart of the child, open communication that communicates love and interest, and avoiding responses that shut down communication. And we seek to bridge the gaps that can appear, and they do appear at times between parents and children. Now, to gain the heart of the child, it's not necessary that we be perfect. Perfection is not a requirement, but honesty is an absolute requirement. A child can smell hypocrisy a mile off. And they know how daddy and mama are when they are in church and how they are at home. And my brothers and sisters, I encourage you to work hard in making that gap smaller and smaller. Here are a few expressions that indicate a gap. My parents' answers to my difficult emotions is always a Bible verse when I really just need a hug and to be told that this is allowed to feel hard. If my parents had to choose between me and the people they're serving, I'm pretty sure they wouldn't choose me. My parents' work is more important than me because their work is reaching the lost, and I already know Jesus. Having said this now, there is no parent, no set of parents that can say, I know how to raise children. I know how to train children. If you do A, B, C, D, E, it'll work out just right. No, that's not really the case. However, we have a great impact. And so the Lord works despite us. Praise God for that. Well, I'd like to look now at children being challenged on the field, and then we'll look at some things that we can do to help them flourish. We'll talk about the challenges first. I'm explaining this term that I use, TCK. This was first termed in the late 1950s, and it refers to a person who spends a significant part of his or her developmental years outside the parent's home culture or passport culture. And so they are foreigners on the field, and they're not exactly comfortable at home. TCK, we've known of PKs and MKs. So we're talking now of third culture kids. And I encourage you to learn about the subjects, about this subject, because this is a real subject that we need to be aware of. In preparation for this topic, I ordered a number of books, and I would encourage you also to look further into this subject. This is one called Unstacking Your Grief Tower. And here's another one, Raising Up a Generation of Healthy Third Culture Kids. I read the first one. And the second one I've started, the writer here is Lauren Wells. She writes in a very easy way to read. It's not difficult. It's engaging. One caution that I would give about her approach, I did not find the name of God nor one scripture reference anywhere. So this is somewhat from a secular standpoint, but there's valuable information. This is Third Culture Kids. This is the third edition. I've just started reading this. What I'm saying is I'm encouraging you to acquaint yourself with what it is like to grow up on a field, a place where you're a foreigner and you come, quotes, home and you're still a foreigner. So now let's look at some of the challenges that TCKs face. There are high expectations. Oh, so you are this missionary family that is in Nicaragua or South Africa or China. Oh, we've heard about, oh, we're just so blessed. Oh, and these are super spiritual people. Yes, they have left home and they have made sacrifices on all these wonderful things that we think about. Well, it's also expected that when we go on the field, that there are results that can be reported back home. Reported progress keeps the interest level and helps the dollars to flow. And mission work in Africa, in Asia, oh, that is so noble. And the exotic experiences, they saw a giraffe out in the wild. Think of it. Oh, and you have learned to speak Spanish. Is it fun to speak Spanish? And then this one. Oh, I'm so glad to see you back home. I'm sure you're just happy and glad to be here again after all these years of absence. Parents, especially, must avoid using their image as a reason to urge their children to make wise choices. Missionary families have problems, difficulties, issues, as well as people at home. What will the people say is far less important than what is the right thing to do. Here's a quote. Family life abroad is complex and individual. This leaves little room for pride or judgment and a lot of room for learning. Rather than conforming to a facade of the perfect ambassador for Christ, missionary families live out the truth of grace, forgiveness, and redemption. Our service is done in humility. So high expectations. This is one of the challenges that TCKs face. Here's another one. Where's home? Home means belonging, stability, security, reassuring familiarity, rest and relaxation. It provides an anchor for many. Where are you from? This can become a real challenge. Raised in a foreign country and yet not fitting in with a parent's passport country. A person without sense of home is a person who is in great need of connectedness because of it. Certainly, parents have a primary role here, but so does the sending church, having an important contribution to make as well. The important need is connectivity, connectedness. Here's a third challenge, and that is abundant misunderstandings. In foreign countries, we're given grace. When you come back to the States, everybody treats you like an idiot because how could you not know that? There are so many misunderstandings. Let me give you a personal example. It was a small thing and really didn't matter, but it illustrates what I'm trying to say. Back in the 1970s, when we were living in Indiana, one of our pastors and his family went on the mission field where they stayed for 6 years till political instability forced them to come home. And I remember it must have been perhaps the first furlough that I heard this brother say, a brother whom I highly respected and had high regard for. I heard him say this. He said, when he came back home here, he discovered that he had forgotten that people had mailboxes out at the end of their drive along the road. I'm sitting there incredulous. Come on. How could you forget something like that? I mean, forget mailbox? I mean, come on. Okay, I said I respected him, and I didn't argue with him or speak up at all. But the day came when I and some of our family went on the mission field, and I was gone over 2 years before I came back home again, and I can't remember whether I had forgotten about mailboxes, but one thing I do know, that I could much better understand that remark than I had at the time when it was made. So, now, I said that I had contact with a TCK, and I'm going to show you one of her quotes. I said, how could your adjustments been made easier or smoother? And here's how she responded. The adjustments in moving to America, going to school, learning how to live in the States, I don't think I actually made the connection that this is adjustment. I was just living in a kind of fog. I wasn't happy, and that's about all I knew. Life was miserable and confusing. I was angry much of the time at the mission field, at the church and school in the States, at my parents, at my friends. I didn't know it would be hard to move to America. Furloughs were always a riot, and they didn't paint an accurate picture of what life actually was like living in the States. I wasn't prepared for hard things in moving home. The social life at school was really hard for me. I didn't understand many of the things my peers were talking about. They didn't understand me. After church on Sundays, I would go sit out in our van and eat a snack I packed that morning. After church, no one talked to me, and I didn't want to talk to anybody either. Now, there's several things that I'd like to point out about what she is writing here. She's saying she was angry most of the time. Notice that she says furloughs were always a riot, but they didn't prepare us for life when we actually come back home again. And now she says further, and it's not on the screen, so to answer the question, maybe having someone reach out to me as unlovely as I was, also being told it's okay to hurt, it's okay to take some time to figure out the hard things. And if you don't have someone that you can talk to, be encouraged to write about it. Get it out of you somehow. Don't bottle it up. So these are some challenges. High expectations, where is home, and many misunderstandings. Let's look now at how children can flourish even in this setting. But he gives more grace. Okay, there are challenges, but there's also grace. And we're happy for that. Do not forget that despite challenges, it's possible to flourish. There is grace, and it is always greater. Grace is always greater than sins, challenges and failure, even when we don't feel like it. Nevertheless, how can we help? There are challenges, and no trite saying, however true, removes those challenges. And awareness of the challenges is a good way to be prepared to help. And providing positive connectivity and to continue in prayer. For many of us, we've not been aware of such struggles because we've not gone through them ourselves. Becoming aware of such challenges is an important step in order to provide solid care. And so I especially would like to encourage the support teams that in all the work that you do, sorry to add something yet further, and maybe I'm not adding, but the matter of how the children are doing is so important. Now, I forget when my time is up. Yeah, I think maybe I had more time, and it looks like it's about 4 o'clock. I will try to rush here a bit. So I asked the TCK, what advice would you offer to ascending church? And here's what she said. If you are going to be ascending church, also be a receiving church. Receive them when they come back. Do your homework and get an idea what it's like for them to move back. Sure, you may not be able to understand, but give the returning family the benefit of the doubt. And as much as the church may prepare for one of their families to move home, there's also the fact that the returned family will just have to go through things that their church will not understand if they can't identify. There may be things that are easier just not to try to talk about or explain to the church because they won't get it. Both parties have to be okay with that. Now, please understand, I'm not saying that everybody is going to have this kind of experience. I'm saying this is a live possibility. Preventive care does not mean taking away all the challenges of the TCK life, but instead coming alongside those challenges with intentional care. The challenges themselves are not the problem. It is the way in which those challenges are walked through that determine whether they become resilience-building experiences or resulting in accumulating fragility. So, we seek to provide positive connectivity. Take time to listen well. We give ourselves. Let them grieve the loss, the change, the unsettledness. Let them ask questions without making them feel stupid. And every TCK is a unique individual that has his own challenges and responses. Give them space, time, and offer your patience, friendship, love, and prayers. And lastly, continue in prayer. Prayer and lots of it. Not substitutionary prayer, but prayer that births doing. Not casual prayer, but earnest striving. We are in a work that is way over our heads. But we have a God that is way over our work. And so lastly, to all the parents who are serving away from home, I have this word for you. Faithful is he that calleth you, who also will do it. God bless you.
Thank you, Brother Earl. I'm sure that every parent in this audience, every one of you who has a little baby you've held on your lap or are holding on your lap is touched hearing a presentation like this. A number of things stood out to me. Thank you for the encouragement to pray daily by name. You know, I'm somewhat ashamed to admit this, but it's only about a year and a half ago that I've started praying daily by name for each of our children. We have 6 now. And I find that that daily prayer for each child by name, praying for them systematically each morning, really does help to connect my heart to them. So I'm sure some of you have experienced that. I see Brother Josh back there nodding his head. He has 11 of them. I have 6. Good for you, Brother Josh. So the things I could share, but I'd like to open it up for all of you here this afternoon. What are comments you have or questions you have for Brother Earl? Thank you so much, Brother Earl, for sharing your heart with us. I think you probably had more you could share. We maybe can have a part 2 on this sometime in the future. I don't think it's a subject we can exhaust anytime soon. What are your questions? What are your comments? What would you like to share? We have about 10 minutes here.
So I'm by no means an expert on the subject, but I was recently in a class where TCKs was the main subject, a main focus of the class. And one of the things that we discovered is that a lot of the people who are doing research on TCKs are not TCKs themselves. And so I just want to throw this out there as y'all put Earl's advice to work and become familiar with the experiences of TCKs. It would probably be good for you to know that TCKs report better lives than the people who do research on TCKs report for the lives of TCKs. That's a little bit complicated. I hope that was clear. But a lot of the testimonials, if you read the entire story, there's abundant good in the stories of TCKs, as well as the abundant hard. And I just want to encourage the rest of us that are looking at raising TCKs to remember that both sides are for sure there. I appreciated what you shared, Earl. I felt that it was a positive and encouraging topic that you shared with us.
Yeah, thank you for that. And I'd just like to point out, on the second slide, I had this about flourishing means to come to full bloom. I got that quote from Tim Albright, who grew up in a foreign country and has been involved in foreign missions most all his life. And I'm also leaving you this example. Steve Sanford's father was heavily involved with what was known then as New Tribes Mission. I don't think he went on the foreign field. Steve's did, and they have 2 sons that are involved. I heard something about Mark Zook. He has a son that is in Papua New Guinea even now. Thank you. What I was giving here is not everyone's experience. Or perhaps they grew out of it. Yes.
Something that my wife and I talk about is, so God is calling us to a work, and our children have no say in that. They're all very young at this point. So there's the hope that our children will gain the same vision, but there's also the fear that our children are just going to hate the country they live in and just want to be in America again. And so any advice on how do you pass on the vision if your children do not get the vision and want to go home? I know there's lots of examples where parents will still have the vision to stay in the country, but they come home because of their children. How do you decide that? Any advice?
How old are your children?
4, 3, and almost 1.
Good. I think they are largely the age that your viewpoints and how you connect with them and how you put yourself into the work and how you enjoy it is going to make a very large impact.
While you're thinking about other questions, just a point for clarification, Brother Earl, you can speak into this further. When we talk about TCK, third culture kids, am I correct that term is being used, so rather than talking about a second culture kid, they're not living in their parents' culture. The reason it's a third culture is it's a hybrid. It's neither the foreign culture they're in, it's different than that, nor is it the passport country culture. It's some kind of a weird hybrid, quote unquote, that is a third culture. It's really a blend of both. Is that what we're talking about when we say third culture kid?
Yes, and it's interesting that people who have had this experience of being away from the passport culture into another culture where it was not where they were born or not their own, even though two people who have been in differing culture, different countries, can come together and find a common bond between them. And it's not because they have lived in the same country. It's the similarity of experience.
Thank you, Earl, for that. Talking about PKs, yeah, I'm a PK, and yeah, I can relate and understand to some of the struggles. I don't understand the mission field and some of the things that go on there, but one of the things we did at our church, like an evangelist comes in for a week, and we always try to remember the children of that evangelist. So in their car every night, there's just an abundance of food and gifts and things. And we heard feedback over the years that some of the evangelist's children, they love coming to Myerstown. And yeah, just some of those things, remembering the children so they get a good taste. You know, Dad and I serve on some boards. Christian Light does very good. We get all the books. So one of our children said, "Dad, don't get off of that board." and I think if we are very, especially missionaries, I think it's so important that the children can have benefits. Like, Dad, this is cool because, wow, this is neat. So, yeah, thank you for all those helpful insights, keeping a vision for the next generation if we lose them. So thank you.
I think you have really touched something here. It's what I call intentionality. And perhaps to your question there, Riley, that I think that speaks in to your question as an important point in the answer.
It would seem to me that furloughs could play a useful role in helping the children connect to the passport culture, and also families from their home church or from their mission committee also visiting the mission field to connect those experiences. Maybe you have further comment on that.
Yes. I think it's already been said here. Perhaps it was Brother Merle who touched on this about physical presence. There's something valuable. And it's good to go. And when we go, remember the children. Now, I know that I'm not like my wife, but she loves to give. And she has all these little trinkets or whatever they are that she has taken along when we have visited. And it was really interesting that maybe within the last year there was one now married child who was on the field that he said, "I still remember you gave me this," I forget what it was, a little bit of something. So I think that is a good way to make connections. The other thing that you mentioned and that the quote included, she said, furloughs were always a riot. Now, I'm not suggesting they shouldn't be fun, but maybe there's something there for us to think about. Yeah. Maybe there needs to be a little better understanding that this furloughs, even at home, this is not exactly real life. Thank you for that.
What I have isn't so much a question, but a comment. I know in our church, whenever we would have our missionary families come back, it would always seem that 2 weeks seemed to be the time where everybody, they come home, they're given about 2 days, and then for 2 solid weeks, they're booked out with people, gifts, and as a younger guy, I would always be talking to the children, and they would be so sick of it by the time that the children would just, all they wanted to do was grab a new book and sit in the corner. And they didn't want to talk about Ecuador or Africa. They wanted to read that book. And maybe there's something to giving space to the missionary families, as you said earlier, is not, it always seems sort of selfish to me to try to get something out of them when they're coming back to recharge.
Thank you for that.
I'm wondering if you have any advice about opportunities to teach children hands-on skills that they would probably have more chances in living in the U.S. That's something I think a lot about with our children. So maybe just a suggestion that if you have a skill that you think the children that you're supporting would be interested in, to invite them over, not wait for the family to ask you, but take them hunting or fishing if that's something you enjoy, or teach them how to, if they're older boys, teach them how to fix a mower or things like that, because they might not have the chance, depending what their situation is overseas.
I think that kind of connectivity is really a good, there's several things, and I appreciate your comments and questions, because it seems to me that we're raising the awareness, and that's what this topic is aimed to do. That could be a possibility.
Appreciated what you shared. It seems like primarily it's geared toward returning missionaries and how their children reintegrate. From a sending church perspective, if there's the potential that that's 10, 15 years away, what are things that we can do, or are there things that we can do to see the children flourish in the setting that they're in? And maybe to somehow enable that transition to be easier, even though it might be a long ways away.
Yes, I know we're talking in a setting here, we're talking long term. We're certainly not talking short term, nor are we even talking about terms as often has been connected with missions. We're talking a good portion of a lifetime. And the child may have even been born on the field. Most or all their developmental years lived there. I don't know what further to say, except the connectivity is really important. And I believe that includes, yes, I believe furloughs are important, but I also believe it's important to visit from periodically, and for the reasons that were given here earlier. Or like Eldon was talking about, he is better able, and I also am better able to understand Leticia rather than just reading about it since we were there. There's some value. Of course, that needs to be worked out with the people on the field because there's another ditch also that we can get ourselves into. But I think that ongoing, here's the thing that I see happening, and a challenge. A family from church is going on the mission field. Oh, we're so excited. We're supporting them. We're so glad they're going. And yes, and we pray for them and all that and so on. And 6 months, a year. Yeah, we have a family in our church that's they're serving in South America. And 2 years, 3 years. Yeah, hey, yeah, right. Yeah, it's okay. That among other things. And after a while, it just kind of, maybe it doesn't work that way for you, but I know some people it does. And so I think there needs to be a constant intention to keep that connection. And of course, that the field member needs to do that as well as the home church. But it's an effort. It doesn't just happen.